But I will welcome all of you. Thank you for being here with us in what is a nice fall evening here in New England. And for Sara in California, it's still daytime. I'm Destiny Barletta. I'm the Director for Alumni Connections with our Career Education Group. And I have the real honor of introducing you all to Sara Gaviser Leslie, who is from the class of 1995. Sara is based in the San Francisco area and does really interesting work in the space of marketing and branding, has worked with a lot of business to business brands, and also has done work with agencies who then have their own client lists. And so she'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to work directly with companies, to work through agencies, and about her career kind of very broadly. So feel free to use the chat button if you have questions along the way. The way the format will work is that we'll talk, for a while, and I'll ask some questions. Sara will tell us all about her career journey. And then if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll also save some time at the end really for each of you to share questions you might have and to just kind of, share responses to the conversation at that time. So, know that there's some space at the end for you to all engage as well. So we can go ahead and get started with that. Let's begin kind of at the beginning, as it were. So just take a while to tell us kind of the story of your career journey and how you found your way and navigated the various kind of stages of your career to get where you are today. And that might include some sense of when you were at Wellesley, if you had known you'd be doing now what you're doing, how would that have sat with you at that point? How would you even known kind of what that was?
I would have had no idea that I'd be doing what I'm doing now when I was at Wellesley. I majored in sociology, and I didn't find out till later that that's considered in lots of places a very easy major. I loved my professors, and that's why I chose that major. And I would encourage you to do major in something that you really enjoy the classes. It's important, I think, that you choose something that you like spending time with the people and the professors. I don't know if any of you are studying any sociology at Wellesley. It's a very research-focused program. It's not at all related to social work, but really kind of how to conduct research, statistics, research methods, looking at really key themes and theories, which I loved. And I remember going to talk to my professor, who's actually not at Wellesley anymore. She's now at MIT. And saying to her, I don't know what I want to do. And I remember her saying to me, if you think, thinking that nonprofit work is good and for-profit work is bad inherently is just not true. There are, just like there is deviance in every society, there are people doing good things in the for-profit world, and there's people doing corrupt things in the nonprofit world. So I think that it's important to look at the opportunity and, not be, or she taught me to kind of look at each opportunity and focus less on kind of the realm of work that it was in. So when I graduated, I actually took a job. I went through campus recruiting. I know this is probably strange, but I love interviewing. It doesn't bother me at all. So I didn't mind doing interviews. I had no idea what I was looking for, but even if you have the slight interest, I think campus recruiting is great because it gives you tons and tons of practice. I mean, even, in the 90s, I remember the staff would video you doing a interview and then give you feedback on it. And that was super helpful. I ended up taking a associate consultant role at a small boutique management consulting firm that actually was like a spin out from Harvard Business School. And they took 6 people from Wellesley, which was really weird, especially for a company this small. And they ended up having too many people to in that first class. And they asked me if I wanted to start in January. And I said, sure, I'll start in January. So I I don't know what I did during the summer, but I ended up traveling in that fall. I went to the Far East, to China and Taiwan and Thailand and a couple other places, because I had the time. And then I came back, I moved back to Boston, and I worked for this company or this firm for about 2 years. I loved studying companies. I found like that was just fascinating to me. I think I'm a researcher at heart. So it was really fun for me to go see a new company, kind of understand their business. But the work I did at that level is just, I mean, you're basically a PowerPoint jockey. And it's very hierarchical. I didn't love that firm. And I'm sure I think, management consulting is different at every place you go, but it was fine. I was just kind of bored, and their work was very, very bumpy. So I wasn't always busy, which drives me crazy. I actually had spent my junior year in Israel, and I had a boyfriend there, and we kind of broke up, got back together, and I decided, well, if this is ever going to work, I'm going to go move there. So after about 2 years at this firm, I left and I moved to Tel Aviv. Actually, I moved to Jerusalem. That's where my boyfriend was. And we quickly realized, or I don't know, I quickly realized, he less quickly, that this was not going to be, but I really loved being there. So I decided, I'm going to stay. I was looking for a job. And I literally had a spreadsheet of all of the people who I knew or who could connect me with. And like all day long, I would just call people on the phone. And it was super frustrating and challenging, but it was one of the most kind of empowering situations and experiences for me, because I had to just keep at it. And like, you can't do it all day to the same people. So you have to keep finding new names and keep yourself busy and keep learning. And I wanted to work at a venture fund. So one of the people I called was literally I had a friend who worked at Fidelity in Boston, and he had given me the name of someone who had left Fidelity, moved to Israel, and he gave me the name of someone else. So I called this person, and he said to me, oh, where'd you go to college? And I said, oh, I went to this like small women's college in Boston. He said, well, which one? And I said, Wellesley. And he goes, oh, my wife went to Wellesley. You should come over and meet her. And she became a friend of mine. She was, I don't know, probably 7 years older than me. And he actually introduced me to the person who hired me. So I ended up working with 2 people, then 3 people. And I did investment research. And it was a great fit for me, because I could learn about companies and then pitch them to internal investors, as opposed to working with them on management consulting type projects. So I stayed there for 2 years. I applied to business school, and I was accepted to Columbia. And then I ended up deferring for a year, because I really liked what I was doing. And so I stayed for 2 years, and then I moved back and started business school with the thought that, well, I really like investment research, but I don't really have all the finance skills. So, and I want to work in public companies. So I ended up starting business school. I thought I really wanted to go down that path. I did campus recruiting again. And I got an internship at the Capital Group, which is based in LA. And they're very similar to Fidelity or any of the big fund managers. They hired 6 people in the whole country. So I felt like really excited that I got this job. It was a really interesting job. They basically would give you part of an industry that they wanted you to cover for the summer, and then you'd present it at the end of the summer. I liked the work, and I thought, oh, I want to do this. But I didn't get an offer. They gave 2 offers out of 6, and they were both people who were in LA. And so I think the fatal mistake was working in San Francisco instead of working in LA. But it was fine. But I decided, you know what, I want to do this anyways. After business school, stayed in New York. I looked for this kind of job again. This was 2002, so terrible time to be looking for a job after 9/11, et cetera. And I got a job at a company that was, it's called US Trust, but it was part of Schwab at the time. And I was a retail analyst. So that means that I covered, and you guys, like, please stop and clarify if this stuff isn't clear or whatever. I'm happy to answer questions. My mom worked in finance, so this was stuff that we talked about at home, but not, I know that's not everyone's experience. Serena, what can I?
Right. You lost me the first time you mentioned Fidelity because I've never heard of that.
Okay, so good. Thank you for asking. Okay, so Fidelity is what's called a mutual fund manager. So if you think about it, you can buy individual stocks and bonds. Bonds are also known as, so it's also known as equities and fixed income. Equities are stocks. Fixed income is bonds because they pay a certain amount. That's the reason they call it fixed income, is when you buy it, you get a payment. You know, they can be really small for some companies, but you get a payment over a period. So that's fixed income. So companies like, so, you know, there's people who are buying stocks and bonds all the time. But for most people, they don't have the time to do that kind of research. So they buy a share in a mutual fund, and that mutual fund is managed by a professional investor. And those are called portfolio managers. And they have all sorts of different themes. They might be a high growth. They might be a value, meaning they buy things that are out of favor and believe that they're going to increase in value. So there's lots of different themes, but the main idea is that it's a basket of stocks that you're buying as opposed to individual stocks. And when you do that, you get rid of, there's a lot of advantages to doing that. You kind of can reduce, hopefully, some of the ups and downs, volatility in those stocks, because you're not just buying one that's spread over lots of different things. And the other thing that's happening is it's passive. Like I don't really have to make any decisions. I put my money in, it goes there, that's it. The downside is the managers have to get paid. So they take a fee for managing your money. And that fee, you don't ever see it. It's just reduced return for you. Does that help? So Fidelity is probably the world's, like, they're the mutual fund supermarket based in Boston, old Boston company. They probably, I think, hire people right out of Wellesley, I'm sure. I see Dana nodding. And they hire you to do research on different companies. And then you would pitch those ideas to portfolio managers. And the portfolio managers are the people who make the buy and sell decisions. Does that help?
That helps a lot, actually. I might be skipping a bit, but the synopsis on what you do sounded a bit more like you were in marketing. I mean, I'm a freshman. I don't
I haven't even
especially.
gotten there yet, Serena. Like we've got miles to go, you know? So what I realized, like, doing this work, is that I love seeing new companies. I love studying companies. I love understanding how they make money and all of those things. So I worked for the summer at Capital. We got further down. I'm at US Trust now. I cover retailers, which means I did all of the big box retailers. So Home Depot, Target, Walmart, some specialty apparel like the Gap, some other consumer discretionary, meaning things that people choose to spend money on as opposed to staples like Procter and Gamble, supermarkets. These are companies that are, you know, clothing, electronics, all of that stuff. And I did that for a couple of years. I got pregnant. My husband is from the Bay Area. We decided we're going to move back. I mean, I liked the job, but I also felt like I'm one of hundreds of people following Walmart and Target and researching them. Like, it's the idea that I'm going to find something new that no one's heard of. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's really going to happen. And I felt like I wanted a change. And so we're moving, and I told my boss, I said, hey, we're moving. Love being here. I'm excited to try something else. And she said, oh, don't leave. Like, you should just stay with the company, work from there. And this is before we had Zoom and everything. I mean, it was not as easy as it is now. Stay with the company and just work from our office in Palo Alto. And I said, okay, I mean, I might as well try it. And she had 3 kids. And she also said to me, you know, when you don't decide now if you're going to come back after you have kids, like, just figure, give yourself time and try it. And if you don't like it, fine. But like, if you never try it, you'll never know. So I moved here. I stayed with that job I had my oldest son in August. I went back to work in January. And like in March, I left. I just felt super disconnected from everything that was happening in New York. I wanted more of a team. I went to work at a hedge fund for a short time. It was so that's like kind of like a small mutual fund, just for simplicity's sake. And they had a really interesting approach. It was behavioral finance, so kind of combining sociology, psychology with finance. I mean, it sounds so fascinating. And I saw, I mean, this is how, like, I saw an article in the New York Times about this firm, or someone from the firm maybe wrote it. And I reached out to him and said, this is really cool. I'd love to talk to you about, I want to work for you. And they said, okay, like, write us, here's an assignment. We want you to do a research assignment. So I did that. They hired me, and they just didn't have enough work for me, but I think they just wanted, I don't know, some reason they wanted to hire me. And I can't explain, I mean, I could go on into why it wasn't a fit, but it wasn't a really boring job, because it was all their decisions were based on a mathematical model. There really wasn't any research. So I left there. I went, I felt like, oh, you know what? I've always wanted to work in development, in fundraising. And I feel like I just would like to try that sometime. I've met a lot of people who do that. I think I could be good at it. I'll try that. Did that for a couple of years. It was fine. It wasn't challenging enough to me. So I felt like, okay, I got to make my way back into the business world. I went to work at Stanford at the business school. At the business school, I worked as a case writer, which is kind of a funny job. It's a job you should know about, though, because this job, and Dana, you can help with this, is a job that HBS, Harvard Business School, used to hire Wellesley students to do right out of college. At Stanford, you have to have an MBA to do that. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me. But it's just a cool job. You basically do a lot of research, and you get to be a really good writer, because you go and study, so say you have operations professor, and they say, I would like to teach about launching an American drug in Germany. And here's this person at Merck, we're going to interview him. He's the CEO. And here's this woman who is the counterpart in Germany, and we're going to interview her, and we create this case for students. And so this was a really interesting job. I had some professors I loved working with. I had some who I just couldn't stand, but it was good. It was like a great place to be for a little while. I had absolutely no career path. It's a job that people do for, I don't know, a few years, but there's no advancement. And when I was there, I worked for a marketing professor and, case writer. Yeah, I mean, you're basically a paid researcher. And we're a pool of writers, and they just, something comes up and they kind of like my boss, I mean, who I couldn't stand, I would kind of say she's like a taxi dispatcher. Like, the call would come in and she'd say, okay, you're going to do this one, you're going to do that one. And she did a little, I mean, we had editors, like, I don't even know what she did, but she assigned people. So I started working with this marketing professor, and she had me write some interesting cases, like one on Zappos. She was writing a book and she wanted these shorter cases. wrote one on Zappos, one on this company called, or organization called Alex's Lemonade Stand, one on Bonobos, the men's clothing. So I started working with her, and then she invited me to want to like introduce me to a couple different things. Like I did some work at the design school at Stanford. I did some work. I go to her classes sometimes. And one of the people she had present was this woman named Nancy Duarte, Duarte. And what Nancy is really, this firm, her firm, Duarte Design, is really kind of the like McKinsey of presentations. If you think McKinsey is like the star of management consulting, or Goldman Sachs is the star of investment banking and commercial banking, they're really like that level of presentations. They'll do huge TED Talks and just really interesting visual presentations. So I reached out to them. I mean, I think you'll see kind of the thread here that is what my husband, his friend calls MYDBK, which I have co-opted for my own, which is make your desires be known. Tell people what you want. Like, you never know if you have to be ready for them to say no, but you never know if they're going to say no. And, you know, it's pretty cool to, you know, put your idea or your request out there and have someone say, yeah, we can try that. So wait, did I see something here that from concept of cases? Okay, so let me just talk about the case study. The case study method.
Just briefly.
Yeah, the case study method is basically in most business schools, they don't use textbooks for a lot of the management classes. They might use it for like accounting. And some schools never use textbooks, like Harvard doesn't use textbooks at all. They teach everything with these real life situations, which they codify into a case. So it's like you read the case before class, you come to class and you discuss it. And there's always like some problem you're trying to solve. And you can do, you know, so that's just the approach to teaching. And I think actually like Harvard Medical School uses cases too. So just some background on that. So this agency, Duarte Design, I started working with them. I interviewed with them. They gave me kind of a project, like a presentation to design. And when I say design, I'm talking about just the content. I'm not a designer, like a visual designer. And they offered me a job. And there were a few red flags that I saw. And after doing this for a while, I've begun to see these red flags. And so I said, you know, I'd love to work with you, but I'd prefer to do it as a contractor. And they said, that's fine. And so I worked with them kind of on and off for a couple of years. So I left the business school. And that was because I was a fixed term employee and my term ended after 3 years. And I just started, this is kind of how I ended up where I am now. I started taking different marketing, content development jobs. And by content development, I mean creating, it's not copywriting as much as more messages for companies. And so after I was doing this for maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I mean, I wrote a book for a company. I basically like ghost wrote that book for them. I had a different experience that actually, Josephine, go ahead and then I'll go on. What's your question?
So sorry to interrupt, but what are those red flags that you said you've started to notice throughout your career?
Yeah. Yes. So one of them was very specific to me. The company Duarte, well, I had talked to someone who had been there who I think left, and she had some issues with them. And I think part of that was her, but I think part of it was the firm. Like she felt like she was promised, oh, you're going to work on all these cool accounts. I mean, this firm started doing work for Apple. Like they were the presentation outsourced design firm for Apple. And they also started doing stuff for Cisco. And what happens when you do that is that a lot of your focus is on those accounts. And those are high paying accounts that have deep pockets. The problem is when they decide they're going to bring it in house, or they have to cut their budget or whatever. That's a hard place to be in. So that was one thing I knew about. The people who ran it are evangelical Christians, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm Jewish, and they had a prayer circle every Monday morning. And I was like, this is going to bother me, So I know myself, like, I know this is going to bother me. The other thing was, they kind of sell you on working with Apple, working with, Michael Pollan, working with they did the slides for Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, like that movie. So, they had really highbrow clients, but then you still had to do the work for Cisco, and that's really boring. And so I kind of had this feeling like this might not be what I want. Plus, I had taken this job at the hedge fund, remember, like a couple of years before. And I knew within like 2 weeks it was a mistake. And, my husband was basically like, leave. Like, fortunately, he was working. I had the luxury of not staying with the job. I was in a good job market. And I just decided, you know what, I'm not going to stay here. I kind of stayed through one earnings cycle, meaning one quarter. And everything I thought was going to happen, like everything I thought, I'll wait for this to happen, it didn't. So I had been burned, and I knew that it was better to just like cut my losses than stay there. So once I got this offer from Duarte, I was like, you know what, maybe I should just try this. And I would encourage you, like, try before you buy. Any chance you get to try something, like as a project, as a contractor, etc. It is so worthwhile. I actually, even with Duarte, like I had a almost full-time contracting position with a friend and her, like in another financial institution. And I literally would work at night doing the Duarte work because I didn't want to like step off that one cliff before I got onto the other one. And yeah, it's like kind of painful. I had 2 young kids at home, but it was worth it to do it, or 3 young kids. So yeah, that's what I would say. And so basically I was doing lots of different types of projects to see what I liked. They were all kind of in marketing, executive communications, that area. And then actually was on a nonprofit board, and they brought in an agency to do a branding and positioning project. And they said, can you come in like as part of the client, like the client side? So we're the customer. And I'm listening to these people and I was like, they kind of do stuff that I do, but they work as a team, which looks kind of fun. They have a much more regimented process, and I'm kind of interested in that. So I asked the person who came in, I said, hey, I'm not interested in working with nonprofits, but I like what you do. And I'd love to know, like, do you know agencies that do B2B, business to business, as opposed to business to consumer, or business, so like work with enterprise companies like Zoom, like Cisco, like startups that serve businesses as opposed to serving consumers. Like Uber is a business B2C company, a business to consumer, whereas Cisco is a business to business company. They're really selling to other businesses. They're not selling to people like you and me. And he said, yeah, I do. And he introduced me to a few agencies, one of whom I connected with. And I contracted with them I still do it with them. So I don't know, 5 years. And I become part of their team. Like they hire me, they have people who are full-time employees, and then they have contractors too. And I come in and do what's known as kind of brand strategy. And so now I'm finally getting to the part that someone asked about. And so we help companies kind of clarify like who they are, why they matter, what they do. So when you think of like I'll just use a brand that you're probably familiar with, Nike. Like Nike's brand is all about like everyone's an athlete. Their tagline is just do it. But the idea behind the brand is, everyone's an athlete and everyone can be an athlete and you're only competing against yourself. So they take that brand and they push out that message in all their marketing, in their sales, in everything that they do is kind of based on that brand. So, and when I say positioning, I mean kind of clarifying the part of the market that company owns. It might be something like the low cost provider. It might be the high end type firm. So we're trying to kind of carve out a part of the market for a company and then develop all the main messages that's like the foundation of who they are and why they matter. So most of the projects I work on, so I do this work with this agency, then I get my own clients too, like people come to me for that. Or just because can never kind of put myself in a little box, I also do fundraising decks for companies. So companies will say, we want to raise money in the private markets, meaning they are like an early stage startup. They raise money in stages and they need to have a pitch deck that they share with potential investors. So I create all the message around that. And this is more of what I did with Duarte, is figuring out how do you build a coherent story and kind of bring people on a journey from what they believe to what you want them to believe. So I still do that sometimes. And I have a designer I've worked with for like 10 years. She lives in Minnesota. We never see each other, but we see each other like this. I now have a partner who I met through one of the agencies I work with. We work together on lots of projects. We have met each other once in person. She lives in Oakland, which is an hour away, but I don't know. And that's what I do. And I also spend a lot of time working with nonprofits, like as a volunteer, but I'm doing things that I've learned in my work life and kind of providing those skills to them, which has been really rewarding. Okay, so I've talked a lot.
That was good. And we got to the marketing part and the branding part.
Finally. But the idea is like,
but interesting, because I think that first kind of if you think about it, kind of the first stage, the kind of finance and kind of, business stage, and then the kind of marketing stage. So you had your Wellesley experience, you went to business school at Columbia. Can you, at this point, share a little bit about what you think the kind of benefits to your career of a liberal arts experience as kind of scaffolding were, not necessarily versus like pairing them off of each other, but, different from the kind of education that you received in business school, and how is the kind of liberal arts piece significant?
Yeah. Wow. So lots of ways. First of all, I would say it's unbelievable how many people I talk to, like prospects or clients, prospective clients or people who end up hiring me, that say it is so hard to find people who are good writers. And let me tell you, I skipped over something. I spent about 1.5 years. Someone asked me if I would backfill their head of marketing who was going on paternity leave. And as you probably realize now, like I love experiments and I love trying things. And I love saying, you know what, I may fail at this, but like, who cares? And I did that. And working in this company was just confirmation that there's a dearth of good writers in our world. And if you are a good writer, you have a value that people want. I think Wellesley, combined with the case writing, because I mean, I was writing 15-page cases, like 10 of them a year. It's a lot of practice. And we had an editor, and I would like look at everything she would send back, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'd make notes of everything. And I was always very open about people giving me feedback. So I think that Wellesley helped me be a great writer. Also, it helped me kind of be open to learning, like getting out of my comfort zone. I mean, I took so many like classes from so many departments at Wellesley. I mean, I took everything from logic in the philosophy department to New Testament in the religion department. I took intro to classical music. And it just like that opened me up to just new ideas. And as you get older, you also see the connections between all those things. And it's like, it's just awesome. Like it feels like your brain is expanding. And yeah, I think that I had no idea what I wanted to study, and I would have not, I don't think like having to be in a very pre-professional track at that stage would have been good for me. And I think being at a liberal arts school where you have professors who are focused on teaching and not doing research, or if they are doing research, they all are doing research, but allowing you to be part of their work. I mean, they're all focused on undergraduate success, and that is great. And you should, reach out to that and, take advantage of that. Columbia was super different. First of all, there were guys there, which was super strange for me. I had some really bad professors, and I had some great professors. And I think I should have focused more on like the great professors as opposed to what I wanted to learn. I felt like I gained competency in lots of things, like creating a financial model, valuing a company, looking at financial statements, understanding, economics, even though I'd taken like one econ course at Wellesley. So I felt like it got me like another kind of credential that I was always going to have, even if I took time off, even if I switched jobs, like I had the MBA. So like that was like helpful to me. I don't think, because we moved to the West Coast, my network of Columbia people isn't that strong because they all live in New York.
If you are kind of thinking about your work in marketing and how that has changed in the time that you've been doing it, what do you think are how would you kind of capture some of those changes, or what are some trends that you're seeing in this space?
Yeah.
And, do you have a sense of, for maybe students on this call who are going to be kind of looking at first destination jobs in the next few years, where might it be going a bit?
So, what I learned when I worked in this company that was a consumer-focused company is all about what's called performance marketing. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. I wasn't familiar with the term until a couple of years ago, but it's really measuring, it's all metrics-based marketing and measuring the return on investment of things like social posts and email open rates, like all of those things that are your generation is deep in. That people who manage that are performance marketers or also growth marketers. So I think if you like kind of marketing and math, or marketing and kind of data analysis, there are 1,000 billion jobs for that, because that's performance marketing and growth marketing. I think a job in that area is an awesome start, because you'll get some basic skills in marketing. That is not what I do at all. What I would do is kind of if you think of like a value chain, and that the performance marketing is evaluating the stuff that's put out. I'm developing like who you are and what you say, and then they develop marketing messages from that, or like who you are, what you do, why you matter, what people can expect from you. And then we develop messages, and then marketing would use those messages, develop all those assets in the social posts, and then performance marketing figures out who do we target and how much do we spend on ads, and how much, like, what do we write in the emails, and A/B tests, meaning like they'll send this type of email to that person and this type of email to this other person, and they'll figure out like which one, performs better. All of that testing and stuff, that's all performance marketing. So especially for consumer companies, that's a huge, huge area right now, because, we can track everything that you do.
What, in all of the kind of work that you've done, how would you describe the kind of thread that connects? I mean, because you've kind of been in, I didn't even realize the fundraising piece. That's interesting too. I mean, you kind of, you've done some quite, kind of diverse things when you think about the various industries. And is there a connection for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about kind of understanding. Well, so I would say Duarte has a way of that's the design firm that I started with. It has a way of taking people, like, they train people in a method of information gathering. And it starts, and I kind of alluded to this before, it starts with like, who is my audience? What do they know? What do they believe? How do they think? Like answering those questions, and then answering questions around, what do I want them to believe? What should they know? How should they act? And that, going from what is to what could be, is kind of how I've seen, like, it's kind of the work I've done in a lot of my career. Because whether you are convincing someone to buy a stock or creating a brand, it's all about understanding your audience and understanding how they think and how you want them to think, and developing a message that they're going to care about. So I would say that I've done that really, since I became an investment research person, but I never really realized it. But I kind of always look back on, well, what do I enjoy about this job, as opposed to what is the job I want to have? What is that title? I think when I was graduating, there was a book called Discover Your Career in Business. I mean, it's so old now, but I think it was a Harvard Business School professor, and it was really talking about like, think less about like the role, and think about what kind of activities are in that role. Like I remember, I think at Wellesley, there were like brand management jobs. And that's like, oh, I manage Crest toothpaste. I manage all their marketing and promotion. And I have basically like, I have a profit and loss statement for them. And I mean, that sounds like a really cool job. And then I hear about what it is. And this is just me. I'm like, oh, like that's very, very micro and very, very specific. And you're looking like very small things. And like, I know that wouldn't be interesting to me. So I try to focus when I'm looking at a job or considering something different, like, is this going to allow me to do the things I want to do? Like, I get bored really quickly. I need change. Well, working with different clients all the time is great for that. And sometimes I stay with them. Like I have one client I've been with for a year and a half because they keep giving me other stuff to do. And I'm like, that's fine, but eventually I get bored with them and I say, I'm done. And that's okay in this world of work.
Okay.
Go ahead, Anne.
Hi, I'm Annie. Thanks for everything you've shared. I'm a senior econ major and I'm looking to explore marketing as a career. And I was wondering sort of, as you've said, like the world of marketing is so wide and there's so many different places that you can kind of find your niche in. Do you have any advice for like sort of how to start in that process, especially like as I'm career searching and job searching this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for someone with your, like at your stage in your career, I think going to an established company that is known for good marketing, you know, I mean, like a Nike, or if it's a consumer company, or I don't know, another kind of well-known brand is a great place to start. Like, I would not start at a startup. I think that there's too much, I mean, too little structure. People are doing lots of different jobs. There's not as much process. And like, you can always do that in your career, but I think going to somewhere like, you know, Amazon Web Services, aka AWS, like that's a great place to start. Any, you know, like established tech company is a great place to start. Healthcare companies, but I think going somewhere where there's going to be both, you can try lots of different roles, and there's going to be people who are more senior and can help mentor you is really important. And by the way, I'm totally fine if you share my contact information. You're more than welcome to contact me.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions? I have a question we can end on when we get there, but I want to make sure I have time for other questions. And the question that you can keep in your mind, Sarah, for ending on is, what is the best career advice you received, and what advice would you give to current students and recent graduates? Are there other questions? Yeah.
Go ahead, Annie.
Okay, I have one more. So since you've been in the marketing world for a long time, I know you mentioned writing, but are there any other skills that you've found are like particularly important or serve you really well in that career?
Anything around conducting research, it's always happening. That's helpful. I mean, it's funny, the tool that I learned on, like doing social research, was called SPSS, and I don't even know if people use that anymore. But I think research and data analysis is really an excellent skill to have. You know, all of the kind of data analytics products today, the trend is moving towards people who are not techie or who aren't data analysts, giving them the power to run experiments and to analyze data. So it's becoming less important that you have, you know, the core data analytics skills, because the tools are so easy. But I still think, like, if you can develop that as a competency, either in your job or take a class, that's super helpful.
And just to add one thing, just as you're kind of looking for your kind of first, you know, job, don't underestimate how much you can learn just on your own in terms of the language. I mean, marketing, I mean, all fields have their own kind of lexicon and their own kind of lingo. Marketing is rife with all of the terms, and being able to kind of decipher it doesn't mean you have to actually understand, you know, how to do all of the concepts at this point, but just understanding the terminology by simply every time you look at a job description and there is a term, an abbreviation, an acronym, a kind of shorthand that you don't know, literally just Google it and like make sure you understand kind of what all the words that are being thrown around. And by, you know, doing that, it will help you to kind of better understand each of the, you know, those kind of discrete kind of areas of marketing.
I mean, I do that all day long, especially with like Urban Dictionary, when I'm working with someone younger and they do like, you know, a shorthand text, you know, I'm not going to ask them. So I have to look it up there. Yeah. Yeah, well, I can answer your last question if you want. When I was in high school, I remember I think he was like dean of students or something of my high school, gave a speech, and he said, the most like the jobs that you have in your career are going to change and are not going to, I mean, some of those jobs don't even exist today. And it's absolutely true. I mean, no one knew what a data scientist was like in 1991. And the most important thing you can do as you go to college and maybe in your life beyond that is to know yourself and know others. And if you know yourself, you're true to yourself and what you want, what you enjoy, not what other people expect from you. That will, and you learn to understand other people, that will serve you well. And I think that's absolutely true. I think one thing I wish, I mean, it probably wouldn't have mattered if someone told me this, but I wish I were less concerned with the jobs I took and how that looked as I was about my own happiness and knowing myself. I mean, I went to my business school reunion, like the 10th business school reunion. I was working on my own. And I remember meeting people who, I mean, almost everyone goes into finance from Columbia, and talking to them and them saying, oh, that sounds so cool. That's great. And I'd ask about their job and they're like, it's fine, but it was, the expectation was that you go into finance and you go into a very lucrative career. And I think some people enjoyed it, but some people felt like I can't leave. I can't do something else because it would be strange. And people would ask like, well, why did you get an MBA to do this? And the fact of the matter is, I don't think I would be as good at my job without an MBA, but it wasn't the path that most people went down. I think the other thing, my advice to you is like, no one knows what they're doing. I mean, some people are just better at pretending. And life is about experimenting, and life is long. I mean, we say, yeah, life is short, but your working years are long. I've been working since I was 22. I'm going to be 50 in a month. And, I don't plan on retiring like before 75. So I've got 25 more years to work, and maybe I'll have a new career, but it's not, whatever you do for a while does not need to be what you do forever. And it's like, you've got a toolbox that I think it's great to think about, you're creating a toolbox and you're putting little things in that toolbox over time. And some of them you're not going to use for a long time, and that's okay. But that whatever that toolbox is, you'll have that with you as you go from job to job.
Sara, I love your experimental spirit, and I love that you are encouraging people to try things in small chunks if you can.
Yes.
A gig, a volunteer role. That's something that we talk a lot about at Career Ed. So really appreciate that you're echoing that. Thank you for telling your story.
Yeah, I mean, I skipped over, I guess, the part that I was like such a huge fan of the Silence of the Lambs that I wanted to work at the, I went to work during January term at the, what's it called? Attorney General's office I was like, I want to be an FBI agent. So I worked at the Attorney General's office in Minneapolis for 3 weeks. I'm like, okay, I got that out of my system. Like, I'm ready to do something else. But, it's like, there's nothing wrong with experimenting and trying.
Yeah, it's great. That's great.
Yeah. So, well, thank you all for listening. And seriously, please share my info. I'm more than happy to talk with you and be a sounding board.
We will. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your insight. This was, we loved going on this journey with you, and started in one place and ended up in a very different place. And isn't that the fun of it all?
Totally. So
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome.
Sarah.
I have a last question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Are you settled?
No.
In doing this, you mean?
Yeah.
Good question.
I don't know. It's funny. I was home. I'm from Minnesota, which I bet tons of people at Wellesley from Minnesota. I have no idea why there's so many of them. But a friend of mine like my best friend from growing up, she has some new, she's always starting different things, and she has a new venture. And I was like, I would work with you on that. And it's funny, I have a friend here who's Australian, and she works with her best friend who lives in Australia. And she said, yeah, we started working together because that was the only way that we would talk to each other all the time.
Oh,
And I thought that is so genius. Like, and I'm not worried about working with a friend. I have so many clients that have become friends of mine, like close friends, that I think like that would be fine. I think that there are people over, there's too much negativity around working with friends, because I think it can be super fun. But I don't know, I'm open to trying something else.
I bet you'll try something else in the next 25 years. Just a bet.
Yeah,
That's where I
exactly.
put my money.
Exactly. So, yeah, nice talking to all of you.
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate hearing all of the different twists and turns your career has taken you thus far, because I think there's a lot of talk and pressure to decide what our careers are going to be, and have this like one role that's locked in throughout time, which is
There is no reason. Yeah.
And I think something that's really exciting for me about being at Wellesley is the sort of continual change of different types of class and different types of learning and different types of experiences, and that variety. And so it's really wonderful to hear you speak about a similar type of theme, and how that's worked for you in your life so far.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's funny. I have a friend who I met at Wellesley. I kind of knew her, and then we worked together after college at that consulting firm. And we kind of got reconnected maybe in, I don't know, 15 years ago. And we do we both work for ourselves. We do a co-mentoring every 3 weeks. We talk about our, we're not, it's not a mentee and mentor, it's just for each other. And like, it's great to find yourself someone like that. And I also think like the people you're friends with at Wellesley, you'll probably stay friends with, but there'll be people who you barely know that you'll meet at some other phase, and they will become your great friends. I mean, one of my friends who, we were friendly at Wellesley, her daughter now goes to Stanford, and she's one of my dearest friends. And now she gets to come on, to drop her off at college. And, I think that those bonds, just because they're not tight now does not mean they won't change later. And yeah, I think the reason I brought up this friend is that she always says, like, don't assume someone's highlight reel. It kind of tells the whole story. Like what we see people's highlight reels out there on social media or in lots of places, but like that highlight reel doesn't explain everything that was, all the video that went into making that. And it's probably lots of ups and downs.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to
Pleasure.
all of the students
Thank
as
you
well.
guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.
See you later.